Welcome back. Let's talk about Apollo. So what is Apollo? GraphQL could be used just with any HTTP client. Let's say you're using Fetch API, which is built into all modern browsers. You can use Axios, you can use Super Agent Request, one of those libraries, because GraphQL doesn't care about the client. All GraphQL needs is the payload and the URL and the post method. Okay, the payload must be certain of a certain structure, but that structure could be created manually when you know how to create queries, how to create queries for mutations. That's pretty easy. So there is no need for any special client, except most developers, they want to use a client because client can offer so much more. Let's take a look at Apollo. So Apollo is a GraphQL client. Apollo has caching. Apollo can format those queries properly. All you need to do is just provide a string. It has its own HTTP agent built into the Apollo, so Apollo makes life easier. Now, how Apollo compares to other clients or other technologies such as Relay Modern and Redux. Relay Modern is also a GraphQL client, but it's somewhat more complicated. It has more features, such as it has pre-processing. So with Relay Modern, you would process all your queries ahead of time before you run them. So it's like one extra build step that you need to do, which is it's not always ideal, but it gives you better optimization. It optimizes the queries better ahead of the runtime. Another difference is that Relay Modern is its API, its interface is much more complex, so it's harder to learn and harder to use. What about Redux? Redux is not it's not a client. It's not a client for GraphQL in any shape or form. Also, Redux is not just for React. Apollo and Relay Modern, they just for React, because they would take your React components. So you cannot use Apollo or Relay Modern with some other technologies such as Angular or Backbone or some other framework. That is very different with Redux. With Redux, you can pretty much use any framework. Redux is agnostic. It doesn't care what framework you're using. Redux is only concerned with the data. It's only concerned with the data. Reducers, you have the reducers, the actions, all that good things, so you can replay back the history. Now, would you use Redux, or would you use Redux and Apollo, or would you just use Apollo? I would say just use Apollo. It already has caching. It's easier than Relay Modern. Until you build some big application with complex logic, with a lot of actions, then you don't need Redux. I personally am not a huge fan of Redux. I understand in large applications it makes sense, but see how far you can get with just Apollo. The way Apollo works is you have your React component, and at the bottom you would put your GraphQL query. You combine them two, you have a new component, and anywhere else you can use that component, and the data will be fetched automatically. It will be cached. There is a automatic UI updates. So all the good things, they are Apollo and GraphQL and React, they're perfectly suited. They're built for each other. Apollo would not work without other technologies. So just see how far you can get with Apollo, GraphQL, and React, and only then introduce more and more libraries. So this is it for this video, and I'll see you in the next video.